A young girl from a small town in Georgia went to a concert and never came back, leaving her father's world shattered by grief and confusion. But 5 years later, a simple ticket stub held the key to unraveling the mystery, leading him down a path he never saw coming. The energy in the arena was electric. Atlanta, Georgia, home to the biggest music events in the country, was the backdrop for a night that seemed destined to become a cherished memory. The bass rumbled through the crowd, and the lights flashed in sync with the music, creating a vibrant scene that felt like the world was vibrating with excitement. People cheered, hands raised high, singing along to every beat. But amidst the chaos and exhilaration, John stood beside Emily, his 16-year-old stepdaughter, her face glowing with excitement, her eyes bright with anticipation. It was a night meant to celebrate life, a night that would mark Emily's first major concert, one she'd begged her father to attend for months. They were close. John and Emily shared a bond that could only come from years of love and understanding. Despite the complexities of blending families, their connection had always been special. Emily felt safe with him, and for John, her presence was a source of joy. As the show reached its peak, Emily excused herself to use the restroom. "I'll be right back," she said with a smile, her excitement barely contained. John nodded, distracted by the thrumming music, confident she'd be back in no time. But she didn't come back. Minutes turned into 10, then 15. John's mind began to race, but he told himself it was nothing, just a few extra minutes lost in the crowd. But soon, the nagging feeling that something was wrong started to take over. He stood up, looking around, his heart pounding faster as the minutes stretched on. "Emily," he called out, his voice swallowed by the loud music. He squeezed through the packed crowd, searching the area, but there was no sign of her. He tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The dread that had only been a whisper in the back of his mind was now undeniable. Something had happened. John retraced his steps, scouring the area, asking anyone nearby if they had seen a teenage girl in a red hoodie. No one had. The concert was still going strong, the crowd oblivious to his growing panic. Emily's phone was left behind on her seat, as though she had vanished into thin air. No one knew where she was. No one had seen her leave. John's breath quickened, his stomach twisted with fear. He rushed to the security booth, his voice shaky as he reported his stepdaughter missing. They told him they'd checked the restrooms, but their response was dismissive, casual even. "She's probably just lost in the crowd, sir. Don't worry." But John's gut told him otherwise. The night of excitement and music quickly dissolved into a nightmare as the venue became a blur of faces and flashing lights, none of which would lead him to Emily. Hours passed, and Emily was nowhere to be found. The concert ended. The crowd filed out. John's world was frozen. 5 years later, John sat alone at his cluttered desk, the faint hum of his old desk lamp providing the only sound in the otherwise silent room. The papers and photographs scattered across the desk were well-worn, signs of years spent revisiting memories, searching for answers that had always felt just out of reach. His eyes moved from one item to another, each one a piece of his search, each one a reminder of his failure to bring his stepdaughter home. In a box tucked in the corner of his office, he found old mementos from the night of Emily's disappearance. Tickets, flyers, concert programs. Reminders of a night that should have been a joyful occasion, a celebration, but had instead marked the beginning of a nightmare. His hands moved slowly over the pile, and then, among the other forgotten scraps, his fingers landed on a crumpled concert ticket stub. At first, it seemed insignificant. It had been there all along, mixed with the other memories of that night. A ticket to the concert, the one Emily had gone to with him. But something about it felt different this time. Maybe it was the years of obsessive searching, the fact that he had gone through every detail of that night 1,000 times in his mind. But now this ticket stood out. He turned it over. It was simple, an ordinary ticket stub. But on the back, in hastily scrawled handwriting, was a note: "Check the VIP parking lot." John's heart skipped a beat. He stared at the words, his breath catching in his throat. The VIP parking lot? He hadn't thought of it before. His mind raced. Why would someone write that on the back of a concert ticket? He had been so consumed with looking inside the arena, talking to security, speaking with witnesses, that he had never once considered checking the parking lot. The parking lot had seemed like an afterthought, a place where cars were parked and left untouched, out of sight. But now the note seemed to suggest something more. A wave of realization washed over him. This was the clue he had missed. He had to know what happened that night. He had to go back and find out. Determined, John grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. The venue had changed since that night. The once vibrant concert hall, now a shadow of its former self, had seen better days. The building stood in stark contrast to the bustling, crowded arena from that night. Time had taken its toll, and now it sat almost abandoned, its glory days behind it. He parked in the same lot he'd parked in 5 years ago, the one that overlooked the VIP parking area. The parking lot looked the same, only quieter now. It was almost surreal to think back to that night, when it had been filled with cars, the space buzzing with excitement. Today it was nearly empty, the few cars parked spaced out, the lot unused and forgotten. John walked around, his mind racing. He approached the security office and asked to speak to someone who might have been working that night. After a few minutes of waiting, a man in his mid-50s appeared. His name was Tom, a former security officer who had worked at the venue for years. "Do you remember anything unusual from the night Emily went missing?" John asked, his voice steady but urgent. Tom scratched his chin, his eyes narrowing as he tried to recall the details. "I remember it was a pretty regular night. The crowd was rowdy, but nothing out of the ordinary. A few complaints about the sound, typical stuff. But there were some strange vehicles parked near the VIP section." He paused, as if trying to pull the memory from the recesses of his mind. It wasn't the usual crowd. There were some people who weren't regulars parked in the back. I don't know what it was, but something felt off, and I think I saw a brief scuffle just by the entrance to the lot, but I didn't get a good look. It wasn't much. Maybe a couple of guys arguing. I didn't think much of it at the time. John felt a chill run down his spine. A scuffle? In the VIP parking lot? He had never been told about that. It was the first concrete lead he had gotten in years. "Did you see anything else? Anything strange?" John pressed, unwilling to let go of the thread. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "No, that's all I remember. But, you should try asking the people who parked near there. I can't remember much more." John thanked him and stepped outside. He was already thinking about where to go next. The parking lot was where it all started. There was something there, something he was missing. He had to find out what. John spent the next several days revisiting the area, speaking to people who might have been there that night. He scoured the records, the old footage from the concert, but it was all in vain. The security footage was too blurry to be useful. The people who had been parked near the VIP lot didn't remember anything useful. It seemed like every door he knocked on, every lead he chased, led to nothing. As the days passed, John's frustration grew. The weight of the search, the constant disappointment, was taking a toll on him. The more he searched, the more his obsession with finding Emily consumed him. It became all he could think about. He was driving his wife, Clara, to the edge. She had stopped believing long ago, and now her patience was wearing thin. Clara had tried to move on. She had her own way of coping, burying her grief and trying to live a life without Emily. But for John, that was impossible. Emily wasn't just gone. She was missing, and he was the one who had to find her. One night, after a particularly long day of fruitless searching, John returned home. Clara was waiting for him in the kitchen, her arms crossed. "John, we need to talk," she said, her voice quiet but firm. John dropped his keys on the counter and sighed. "I know, Clara. I know you don't want to keep doing this. I get it. But I have to. I have to keep looking." Clara shook her head. "You're losing yourself in this, John. I've been here trying to move on. But you can't let it go. It's been 5 years. 5 years, and all you have is a few scraps, a couple of vague memories, and some stupid note on a ticket stub. What are we doing here, John? What's the point?" John's eyes were red, his face tight with the weight of his obsession. "The point is, Clara, I won't stop until I find her. Emily is out there. She's not gone. I know she's not. You may have given up, but I haven't. I can't." Clara's face twisted in pain. "John, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep watching you do this to us. I need you to stop. I need you to be here with me. We can't keep pretending we're still a family when all you care about is finding a ghost." John recoiled at her words. "I'm not pretending, Clara. This isn't a ghost. This is my daughter. And I will not let her be forgotten." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but she didn't back down. "I don't know who you are anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, filled with unspoken words and unresolved pain. John didn't respond. He couldn't. He just turned away, retreating into the office again, determined to search to find any clue, no matter how small. Clara watched him go, the gulf between them widening with every step. As the door to the office closed, John sat back down at his desk. The ticket stub lay in front of him, the note still staring back at him. Check the VIP parking lot. He had to keep searching. The investigation was just beginning, and he wasn't going to stop. After the argument with Clara, John found himself alone again in the office, surrounded by old case files, ticket stubs, and crumpled flyers. The constant barrage of Emily's absence seemed to fill the room, like the thick silence that always followed when she was gone. But today, something about the quiet felt different. The air felt still, and his thoughts were heavy with the weight of all the years he'd spent searching. He sat back in his chair, trying to clear his mind, but it was as if his thoughts were glued to the case, always circling, always looping back to the same unresolved moment. His eyes drifted across the room to Emily's old journal, tucked away in a box under his desk. He hadn't looked at it in years. It felt too painful to read back then, but now, after finding the note on the ticket stub, maybe it could offer something new. A clue, a sign, something. John pulled the journal from the box and flipped it open to the first page. The handwriting was familiar, neat, and simple. He read through the early entries, school days, friends, the usual teenage worries. But as he continued, something caught his eye. In the middle of an otherwise normal entry, Emily had written about a secret admirer. John's heart skipped. Ryan, the name written in the journal, stood out. He hadn't heard that name before, at least not in connection to Emily's disappearance. His eyes scanned the entry. "She met him online," Emily had written. "He promised he'd be at the concert tonight. He said he'd be waiting for me by the entrance. I hope I can find him. He's so cute." The entry was dated just days before the concert, the very concert where Emily vanished. John's hands began to shake as he turned the pages, hoping for more. But the next entry was different. It was abrupt, with no further mention of Ryan, just a note that read, "I don't think I should be talking to him. Something feels weird. I'm not sure if he's who he says he is." The journal entry ended there, and John stared at the page, the words hanging in the air. There was no more information, no follow-up, no closure. Just an abrupt stop, as if Emily had stopped writing in the journal entirely after that. John felt the familiar pang of anxiety in his chest. His mind raced. Had she met this Ryan? Was he somehow involved? There were too many questions and not enough answers. The journal, which had always seemed like a simple account of a teenager's life, now held a potential clue. a lead that could take him somewhere closer to finding Emily. As John sat in his office that evening, his mind not on the journal but on the revelation about Ryan, his phone buzzed. It was Clara. He hesitated before answering, knowing their conversation would be difficult. "John, we need to talk." Clara's voice came through the speaker, strained, as it always was lately. She wasn't asking for a conversation. She was demanding it. "I'm busy," John replied, his voice tight. He didn't want to argue again, but he knew this conversation was coming. It always did. "Busy with what, John? Another lead that goes nowhere? Another wild goose chase?" Clara's voice broke slightly. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep watching you chase ghosts while our life falls apart." John felt the anger rise in him. He could feel his chest tighten with frustration. "I'm trying, Clara. I'm trying to find her. You don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Clara shot back. "This isn't just about Emily anymore. It's about us. It's about the life we're supposed to be living together. You're so obsessed with this that you've forgotten we're still here." "I'm still here." John paused, trying to steady his breathing. He felt the familiar ache of guilt but pushed it aside. He wasn't ready to let go. He couldn't. "I haven't forgotten you," he said, his voice quieter now. I just need to find her. I need to know what happened. I need to know that she's okay. I want to know, John. But we've been through this so many times, and I'm tired. I'm tired of waiting for something that's not coming. We're hurting each other. You're pushing me away." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Clara's words hung in the air, heavy with frustration and hurt. John looked around the office, at the photos of Emily, at the clutter of memories and unspoken words. He didn't know how to answer. He didn't know how to make Clara understand. "I'm doing what I can," he said finally, his voice distant. "I'll be home later." But Clara didn't respond. The line went silent, and John set the phone down with a heavy sigh, the weight of their marriage pressing down on him. But it wasn't just Clara's hurt that weighed on him. It was the constant battle between his obsession and the growing distance between them. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing everything, even as he desperately tried to hold onto the hope of finding Emily. As the days passed, John couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan, the secret admirer, might be the missing piece to this puzzle. He needed to find out more about him. He had to know who this person was, and whether he had anything to do with Emily's disappearance. After some searching, John tracked down Ryan's last known social media accounts. The profile was still active, but with little information. He wasn't sure what he expected to find. Maybe a clue, a connection to Emily, but there was nothing that stood out. It was just a name, a few photos of a generic happy guy. John pushed forward, digging deeper. He eventually found a phone number linked to the profile and dialed it. After several rings, the voice on the other end picked up. "Hello, is this Ryan?" John asked, his voice firm but cautious. "Yeah, who's this?" Ryan replied, his voice unfamiliar but friendly. "This is John. I'm looking for someone who went to a concert 5 years ago. Emily. She's my stepdaughter." There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a sharp intake of breath. I don't know what you're talking about, man," Ryan said quickly. "I don't know anything about her. We talked once, but that's it. She's probably just another girl from the concert who got caught up in the moment. Right?" John's instincts flared. Something about Ryan's response didn't sit right. He'd been prepared for some kind of denial, but this felt different. It was too defensive, too fast. "What happened after the concert, Ryan?" John pressed. "Where did you meet her?" Ryan hesitated, his voice a little less certain now. "Look, man, I don't know what you're trying to get at, but I don't remember anything. We talked for a minute, then I lost track of her. That's all I know." John's suspicions deepened. "So you never saw her again after the concert? You didn't try to help her or look for her?" "I told you I don't know anything. I didn't see her again. John's stomach twisted as he hung up the phone. There was something off about Ryan's response. He wasn't telling the truth, but John didn't have enough to confront him with. Not yet. Frustrated, John turned back to the footage from the concert. The security camera recordings were grainy and unclear, making it impossible to discern anything useful. Hours of his time were spent trying to make sense of footage that didn't reveal a single detail. It was like looking through fog, his search hindered by an invisible wall. Every time he thought he had a lead, it slipped through his fingers. The VIP parking lot, the secret admirer, the journal entry, it all seemed to lead nowhere. John felt like he was chasing shadows, retracing his steps over and over again, hoping to find something he missed. But the pieces of the puzzle were too small, too fragmented to form a clear picture. The sense of hopelessness crept back in, a familiar companion. But John refused to stop. His obsession grew stronger. Every dead end, every setback, only pushed him further into the search. He couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. He had to keep going. John was on the edge of giving up. He had spent years digging into every corner of the case, relentlessly chasing leads that all seemed to dissolve into nothingness. His obsession with finding Emily had drained him, emotionally, physically, mentally. The walls of his office, once filled with hope and possibility, now felt like a prison, suffocating him with reminders of a search that had led nowhere. But just as he was about to abandon the files and shut everything down for good, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something made him pick it up. He braced himself for the usual disappointment. Another dead end. "John?" A gruff voice came through the phone, interrupting his thoughts. "This is Detective Maynard. I used to work on your stepdaughter's case." The name hit John like a lightning bolt. Detective Maynard was a retired detective who had worked on the investigation years ago. He had been one of the first to look into Emily's disappearance, but after months of dead ends, he had been reassigned to another case. John had almost forgotten about him. "I've been going through the old case files again," Maynard continued. "I was cleaning up my office, and I found something I missed the first time. The date on the ticket stub, the one you found, matches the day a high-profile crime syndicate was known to be in the area. I couldn't believe it at first, but when I checked the details, it lines up." John's pulse quickened as the words sank in. "What do you mean, a crime syndicate?" There was a big human trafficking operation happening nearby. The syndicate was known to operate in the area, and they often moved victims through concert venues. They used VIP areas and parking lots as drop-off points. I never connected the dots before, but now it makes sense. I think we've been looking at this all wrong, John. Your stepdaughter might have been caught up in something much bigger than we thought. John felt a wave of nausea sweep over him. Human trafficking? All this time he had been searching for Emily, thinking she had run away or was involved in something reckless. But now, the possibility that she could have been taken by force, that hit him harder than anything before. It all started to fall into place. He pressed his palm against his forehead. "What do we do now?" "I've been in contact with an informant," Detective Maynard replied, his voice low. "Someone who used to work with the syndicate. I've asked them to meet with us." John knew what that meant. This was the moment everything changed. He could finally follow this lead, but he also knew it wasn't going to be easy. There were dangerous people involved, and if Emily had truly been taken, then time was running out. The next day, John met with Detective Maynard at a small, run-down diner on the outskirts of town. The place was quiet, barely anyone there, but John couldn't shake the feeling that this was where everything was going to shift, where the answers all these years in the making were going to be revealed. Maynard's informant, a former low-level member of the syndicate, had agreed to meet them. She had been scared to talk at first, but after being pushed by Detective Maynard, she had finally agreed to share what she knew. She was a woman in her late 30s named Tara. her face hard and weathered from years of living on the edge. John felt a mix of disbelief and hope as he listened to Tara. She had agreed to meet them for one reason. She wanted out. But getting out of the syndicate wasn't easy. The people she had worked for weren't the type to let go of their operations without a fight. "I worked with them for a couple of years," Tara said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to be watching. "The VIP parking lot you're asking about, that's where they did a lot of the drop-offs. It was always busy after big events. People never paid attention to who was coming in and out. That's how they moved people, you know? Under the radar. Just a quick exchange." John leaned forward, barely breathing. "And Emily? Was she one of them?"
Tara hesitated.
"I don't know for sure. I didn't see her that night, but there's a chance she could have been taken. I was with them and I saw things, girls who looked too young to be there. The whole thing was set up like a machine. You've got to understand, John, these people know how to make things disappear. They don't leave a trail, and if they do, they cover it up fast." John's mind spun. It was worse than he had ever imagined. Emily wasn't just missing. She could have been taken by a criminal network, one that moved in silence, leaving behind nothing but confusion and unanswered questions. The weight of this new truth hit him harder than any clue he had found before. "What can we do now?" John asked, his voice cracking. "I can give you an address," Tara said, her eyes flicking nervously. "There's a place. It's not far from here. A facility outside of town. I don't know what goes on there, but I know it's connected to the syndicate. If she was taken, it's possible she's there, or someone might know what happened to her." John's heart pounded. This was the break he had been waiting for. The lead he had almost given up on was now within reach. There was a chance, just a chance, that Emily might be alive. He had to act. With a renewed sense of purpose, John and Detective Maynard headed to the address Tara had given them. The area was remote, on the outskirts of town, with overgrown trees and abandoned buildings scattered around. The facility Tara had mentioned was a large, run-down warehouse, hidden from view by a cluster of trees and old fencing. The place had the feel of a forgotten world, one where things went unnoticed. As they approached, John's thoughts raced. This was it. This could be where Emily was. Or it could be another dead end. "We need to be careful," Maynard whispered, his eyes scanning the area. "This isn't something we can just walk into. We don't know what we're up against." John nodded, his fists clenched. He had come too far to back down now. "We have to try." They crept through the shadows, moving closer to the building. Every step felt heavier, every sound sharper in the silence of the night. The door to the facility was slightly ajar. John reached for it, hesitating for a moment, then pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the place reeked of mildew and stale air. But there was something else, something colder in the atmosphere. John's eyes darted around the dimly lit space. Shadows shifted against the walls, but there were no signs of people. The facility looked abandoned, but the sense of danger lingered in the air. They moved cautiously through the building, each creak of the floor beneath their feet echoing like a warning. Finally, they reached a door at the back of the warehouse. John's hand gripped the handle, his heart pounding in his chest. As they entered the room, the smell of chemicals hit them first. The room was lined with metal shelves, filled with old, dusty boxes and what appeared to be medical equipment. It looked like a storage area, but there were no signs of anyone being here recently. Just more silence. Then John heard it, a faint sound, a soft rustle, as if someone was moving in the far corner. His blood ran cold. Maynard raised his hand to signal for silence. The two men crouched low, listening. There, in the corner of the room, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman. Her face was dirty, her clothes torn, but her eyes, the eyes were unmistakable. She looked terrified, shaking in fear, but John knew immediately. It was Emily. She was alive. "Emily?" John whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. The girl turned to face him, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. But when she saw his face, something in her eyes shifted. Recognition. "Dad?" she whispered hoarsely, as if she wasn't sure she could trust her own voice. John's heart exploded with relief, but it was quickly replaced with concern. Emily was here, but what had they done to her? What had she been through? "Emily, we're getting you out of here," John said urgently. "You're safe now." As they rushed toward her, the sound of footsteps behind them echoed through the building. They weren't alone. The chase was on. John and Detective Maynard moved cautiously through the abandoned warehouse. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the cold, empty space. The hallway stretched on, dark and narrow, like it was leading them deeper into a forgotten part of the world. There was no turning back now. Emily was in there somewhere, and they had to find her, before it was too late. The tension in the air was palpable. Every turn seemed to lead them deeper into the unknown. They reached the back of the warehouse, where the rusted metal door stood, barely hanging on its hinges. Maynard gave John a quick nod, signaling for him to be ready. John's heart was pounding in his chest, but he didn't hesitate. He opened the door, and the sight that greeted him was both shocking and heartbreaking. Inside was a small room, dimly lit by a single, flickering light bulb overhead. The walls were covered in old photographs, dozens of them, some faded, others almost too new. Each picture was of a young girl, their faces frozen in time. And among them, tucked in the corner, was a photograph that stopped John dead in his tracks. It was Emily. Her face was the same, but the context was all wrong. She looked as if she was posing for the picture, but her eyes were distant, as if she had been forced to smile for the camera. The realization hit John like a freight train. These girls weren't just missing. They were being used. This was part of a network. This wasn't just about Emily. It was about dozens of others who had disappeared without a trace. "Get ready," Maynard whispered, pulling John's attention back to the present. He motioned for John to follow as they moved further into the room. At the far end, there was a metal door, locked tight. John's breath quickened. "This is it. She's in there." His hands trembled as he grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. Inside, Emily was lying on a cot, her body thin and frail, her hair matted. She looked up at them with vacant eyes, as if she couldn't believe she was being found. "Emily!" John gasped, rushing to her side. She flinched at first, confused and frightened. But when she saw John's face, her eyes softened, and she let out a breath of relief. "Dad?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from lack of use, but it was unmistakably hers. John reached down and gently lifted her into his arms, holding her tightly as though he could shield her from all the pain she had endured. Emily clung to him, trembling, as if afraid to let go, as if she feared he might disappear again. The emotions flooded through John. Relief, joy, but also anger. Why hadn't he found her sooner? Maynard stepped forward, signaling for John to follow him. "We've got to get her out of here. Now." The urgency in Maynard's voice snapped John back to the moment. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. There was no time for anything else. The sound of footsteps came from behind them. Someone was coming. They had to move fast. The trio moved swiftly through the warehouse, but the sound of approaching voices grew louder. John's mind raced. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for, but it was also the moment everything could fall apart. They had to get out before the traffickers realized what was happening. "Move!" Maynard hissed, pushing Emily forward. They made it out of the building just as several men emerged from the shadows, shouting angrily. John and Maynard pushed through the dark, weaving their way through the maze of alleyways that led to safety. Emily stumbled alongside them, her legs weak, but she was strong. Stronger than John had ever realized. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Maynard slammed the door shut behind them, and they sped off into the night, the warehouse disappearing in the rearview mirror. John's grip on the wheel tightened, his heart still racing from the close call. But now all that mattered was Emily. They were safe for now. The drive back to town was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. John kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The weight of everything he had been through, the years of searching, the doubts, the failures, it all seemed to flood back in waves. But now Emily was with him. She was alive. She was safe. But there was still the question of Clara. The years of tension between them, the strain on their marriage, the distance that had grown with every passing day. John hadn't even thought about her while he had been searching. All he could think about was Emily. He knew that would have to change. When they arrived home, Clara was sitting in the living room, waiting. The house felt different. Empty without Emily's laughter, without the life that used to fill every corner of it. The moment Clara looked up and saw Emily standing in the doorway, her expression shifted. Shock, confusion, and then the tears started. Clara jumped to her feet and rushed toward Emily, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch her daughter. Emily, you're really here. Oh my God, you're really here. Her voice cracked as she pulled Emily into a tight embrace. For a long moment, they just stood there, holding each other, the weight of 5 years finally lifting. But as the tears slowed and the embrace ended, Clara stepped back, her face clouded with something else. John watched them, his heart torn between relief and guilt. He had found Emily, but the tension between him and Clara, between the man he had become and the woman who had been left behind, was still there. John, Clara said softly, her voice steady but strained. What happened? Where did you go? Why didn't you tell me what you were doing all this time? John opened his mouth, but the words didn't come out right. He had spent so long focusing on finding Emily that he had lost sight of everything else. Of Clara, of the life they used to share. His obsession had driven a wedge between them, one that might never heal. I couldn't stop, he finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't let her go. I had to find her. I couldn't give up on her. Clara's eyes softened, but there was still pain there. I know, John. I know. But I was here too. I was here and I didn't know how to get you back. We were both hurting and I didn't know if we'd ever be okay again. John stepped closer, his heart aching as he reached for Clara's hand. I'm sorry. I should have been here. I should have seen it. We've both been holding on to different things, and I didn't know how to bring us back together. Clara looked at him for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Then, she nodded, her voice quiet. We'll figure it out, John. We have to. John felt the weight of those words settle in. They had a long road ahead. The damage couldn't be undone in a moment, but the fact that they were both willing to try, to heal together as a family, was enough for now. In that moment, as they stood together in the living room, John realized something. Finding Emily had been the hardest part, but rebuilding what they had lost, that was going to be the true test. And for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk together. For Emily, for Clara, for them all. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The sun had long set as John and Clara sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The house felt quieter now, with the weight of the past few days slowly sinking in. Emily was upstairs, resting, recovering from the emotional and physical toll of the last 5 years. John stared at the cup of coffee in front of him, his mind still spinning with everything that had happened. He could feel Clara's gaze on him, but he didn't look up. There was so much to say, but no words seemed to be enough. I'm sorry, Clara said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was gentle, but there was still a trace of hurt in it. For all the time I spent being angry with you, for not understanding. But she hesitated. looking for the right words. I didn't know how to deal with it either. I didn't know how to keep going while you were so lost in your search. John looked up at her then, his face full of regret. He could see the pain still lingering in her eyes. His obsession with Emily's case had pulled him away from her, from everything they had once been. I should have been there for you, Clara. I know that now, John said, his voice thick with emotion. But I couldn't stop searching. I couldn't stop looking for her. I thought if I just kept going, kept pushing, it would all make sense again. But it didn't. And I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most. Clara reached across the table, her hand brushing against his. The touch was soft, hesitant, but it was there. It was a small gesture, but it carried so much weight. It was a sign that despite the years of pain, despite the distance, they were still together. We've both been through so much, Clara said, her voice steady but fragile. But maybe it's time we stop carrying all that weight on our own. Maybe it's time we heal together. John nodded, the tears threatening to spill over. He could feel the weight of the past 5 years pressing on him. The pain of not knowing, the guilt of neglecting his family, the loneliness that came with believing that Emily might never return. But in that moment, as Clara's hand rested in his, he felt a glimmer of hope. They could rebuild. They had to. We'll get through this, he whispered, squeezing her hand. Together. The camera pulls back to show the family table, dimly lit with 2 coffee cups in front of John and Clara. But there was one more thing, one final piece of this journey that still haunted John. The ticket stub. It was lying on the table between them, the edges worn and faded from years of being carried in his wallet, from the many times he had clutched it when hope seemed lost. John reached for it, his fingers brushing against the crinkled paper. He unfolded it slowly, revealing the note on the back. Check the VIP parking lot. It was the message that had led him down this long road, the message that had kept him going when everything else seemed pointless. It had once been a symbol of the pain, the uncertainty, the questions that had no answers. But now it was different. John stared at the note, his eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and relief. The ticket stub was more than just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of everything he had endured to get Emily back. It had been a haunting reminder of what they had lost. But now, in the quiet of this moment, it was a symbol of hope, a symbol of a family reunited, of a new beginning. He turned the ticket over, his fingers tracing the words, and for the first time in years he felt a sense of peace. The journey was far from over, but they had made it this far. Emily was home, and that was all that mattered. Clara watched him, her eyes softening as she saw the expression on his face. They didn't need words now. They didn't need to keep looking back. The past, though painful, had led them to this point. A point of healing, of understanding, and most importantly, of togetherness.